welcome back to Litigation Help. My name is Heather Hui-Litwin, and today we'll be talking about the law on spousal support in Ontario, Canada. Please note that we are only providing general information and we cannot provide legal advice specific to your case. And joining me here are our regular guests, Tarcea and Eva DiGiammarino, both from Family Mediation Group. Hello, both. Welcome back.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for being here. So Eva, maybe we can start with you. Could you explain to us what spousal support is?
Sure. So spousal support is meant to be essentially when one person provides income support to another person through separation and divorce. So it's not meant to be forever, but it's really meant to help the recipient get on their own 2 feet and be able to support themselves economically. Now, depending on a host of factors like age, their training, their needs, that's when we get into the weeds of it all and we talk about, how long, how much, etc.
Are common law partners also entitled to spousal support?
Yes. So it doesn't matter whether you're legally married or not, you can be entitled to spousal support.
All right. So how do you, what are some of the factors, I guess, that the court would consider when it comes to entitlement?
Sure. So we always look at a number of factors. Those factors are the age of the recipient and the age of the payor, the work experience of the recipient. And really what we're looking when we look at work experience is we're looking at whether they need to go back to work and go back to school to get better training, or whether they can jump back into the workforce or not, or whether they're currently working. So we look at their work experience and where they're at now. And really what we're trying to answer is, did they make sacrifices to their career because of their relationship? And if yes, how can they be recompensated because of those sacrifices? Okay. We look at whether there are any health issues or disabilities on the part of the recipient. For example, is the person who is asking for spousal support asking because their health issues make it harder for them to earn an income? So we look at the health issues. We also look at the roles during the relationship, which is closely tied to work experience, right? Was one person during the relationship taking a back seat to support the other person's career? So we look at the roles and the expectations during the relationship. And Laura, I think I got them all. Did I miss any that you can think of?
No.
I think that's pretty much it. Those are the factors that we really look at.
So the factors are mostly concentrated on the recipient as opposed to the payor. Oh, that's interesting.
Certainly we will be looking at the payor's age, their income, and obviously their ability to pay. But yes, when the recipient is coming to the table and saying, I want or I'm entitled to spousal support, they have to be prepared to look inward. Their case and their arguments are going to be looked inward to see if they are entitled, for how much and for how long.
This is more like a practical question. So let's say that I want to claim for spousal support. What are some of the evidence that I would, have to produce to convince, I guess, a judge or an arbitrator to, side with me, I guess? What is some of the evidence? Yeah.
So when we are looking at those factors, you're going to try, when you're making your case for spousal support, to show that you have the factors necessary to require you for spousal support, or that the factors are the more significant the factors in your case, the stronger your case is for support. So I'll illustrate that with an example.
Great.
A classic spousal support example is where one person has stayed home during the marriage or the common law relationship to rear children.
Right.
So let's say it's a 25-year relationship and that person has not worked for 20 years because they stayed home, they took care of the children, they took care of the house, they supported their other partner. The other partner has worked for those 20 years. Now, let's say it doesn't matter who's asked for separation, but they're separating.
Mm-hmm.
The person that has not worked during the marriage
Mm-hmm.
typically is going to have a hard time entering into the workplace because they've been out of it for 20 years. It doesn't mean they haven't necessarily worked, it just means they've worked in the home. And the career market doesn't always value that experience in terms of work experience.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes the spousal support is meant to acknowledge that they worked within the home and that they should be compensated as such, and to acknowledge that it may take them longer to enter back into the workplace. So that person is going to say, well, I need spousal support because I don't have many skills that are transferable. I'm not a trained florist. I'm not trained as a plumber or electrician. I have to go back to school in order to learn a trade or to boost my skills that I can translate into a job. Another classic example is when you're separating from someone who has a disability.
Right.
And the disability holds them back from entering into the workplace for a long time or in any significant way. So for example, Laura and I have dealt with families where one person can only work part-time.
Mm.
Or they cannot work a job that is physically taxing.
Right.
Because of their disability.
Right.
So you're going to have to bring evidence like medical information and things like that to the table.
Just going back to what you said about the retraining example, which was very interesting. So let's say I'm saying that, well, I've been out for 20 years and I need to do retraining. Would I then be obliged to actually attend, training courses? Okay, so if you're making that claim, you better be ready and be prepared, and you shouldn't be sort of faking a claim and say, oh, I need retraining. You take the support and then you don't apply it towards the retraining. So that would not be.
And in fact, you may get more spousal support in the first couple of years if you're receiving monthly amount of spousal support, but there will be an expectation that maybe, let's say, at the end of a 3-year period or 5-year period, it will decrease because then you will have gotten the training that you said you were going to go get, and now you can enter into the workplace. So yes, someone who is saying, well, I'm going to go back to school has to show proof of that.
Oh, okay. So they actually have to show proof that they are using that money of spousal support for that purpose. So speaking about amount, how does one go about calculating the amount? Or Laura, do you want to take that question? Yeah, how does one go about calculating the amount of spousal support?
It's income driven. So we always start with looking at an income, or looking at both of individuals' incomes. And there is a software that we use. It's called DivorceMate software. I'm sure it's also online if somebody goes to I think mysupportcalculator.ca. They still can plug in some of the numbers. It's a little bit more simplistic just because we can play with a little bit more in terms of how we use the incomes versus, gross incomes, base salaries, deductions, pensions deductions. So there's a little bit more depth to using the software when we talk about income, but needless to say, is income driven. And as opposed to child support, which is pretty much black and white, there's only one number. Unfortunately, the spousal support calculation and the software spits out a range where, a range of 3 different values, low, mid, high. And, then it's asking the 2 individuals negotiating to take all the factors that Eva had mentioned and more, depending on their unique circumstances at the time, take those into account and then come up with their own amount, right? So, which can be a very, very challenging discussion and a very, very difficult, way to get to an outcome, to come up with a number, because there is no exact number.
So during a mediation session, and because you guys are both mediators, I guess this is almost more like an in-depth, almost like a negotiation exercise with you helping the parties come to an agreement of what is a fair number for the spousal support. And I'm also actually now surprised because you're saying it's income driven, so it doesn't matter what the net worth is. What I'm trying to ask is, let's say that one of the partners have $1 billion, right? In savings. Let's just assume, they have lots of money in savings, but they have arranged their financial affairs so that they pay only a small amount in income, right? So in this spousal support calculation, it really doesn't matter whether that partner has a lot of saved money?
No, it certainly can. And what I always joke with our clients, and I say, if anybody is trying to skirt the law or skip the law, someone has already tried it, and the courts have addressed it. So there's very few ways you can get around the law. So for an example, someone always says, well, if I win the lottery, right? Yeah, that's my property, so I don't have to divide my property after support, and now I'm not going to have an income. Well, no, that's not the case. What happens is, if someone says, well, I have a lot of assets, so I'm not going to earn an income.
Yes.
An actuary would take their net worth and calculate what their net worth would actually be as an income.
Oh, isn't that okay? That's really interesting to know. Yeah.
So you would still get an income to be produced based on your net worth. Now, we're talking about very high income earners, that are essentially living off of their assets, and they're not earning an income. But the takeaway should be that really no one can avoid their requirement under the law. So when Laura and I are dealing with average Joes, what we hear often is, well, my spouse is self-employed.
Yes.
And so they are significantly reducing their income when they file for taxes.
Yes.
And when we say, no, there's a way to get the law has addressed that already. The law has addressed that by identifying certain expenses that you can deduct for taxes cannot be deducted for calculating spousal support.
Oh, interesting. I see.
Right. And we would add them back. So that's just kind of the other side of the coin. When we're looking at income, it's actually very hard to reduce your income to the point that you're not paying spousal support.
Now, another situation I was wondering was, so these days, a lot of times you have, say, two professionals, right, in a couple. And so have you come across instances where you have two doctors married to each other and they have relatively the same amount of savings? So in cases like that, does that mean that there would be no spousal support entitlement?
Yeah, there could be a case where there's no entitlement. Generally, my rule of thumb, but this is not a hard and fast rule, this is just my rule in practice.
Right, okay.
But generally, for there to be a spousal support claim, we want to see a differential in income of at least $40,000. And again, there's no $40,000 rule. That is just with my experience. When reading cases, I've noticed that there has to be a difference about 40,000. If there's less of a difference and both parties are working, then the claim for spousal support is not as strong.
Okay, so that's great. You've answered my question and then some.